Path of Exile 2 Early Access already looks packed with content and an eye-watering amount of endgame. As we get closer to December 6th, here's a quick recap and rundown of all the info you should know ahead of jumping in. From when and how to access, what you get access to, plus all the new goodies waiting for you in it. Now, for those of you who don't know specifics, early access will begin at 11 a.m. PST on December 6th, and it's expected to run for at least 6 months. You don't lose your character, and the progression is also kept. Instead, those characters will get added to a separate early access league instead of standard when the game actually exits out of early access, of course, for balancing reasons. Now, to get in the early access, you will need to buy a supporters pack. They start at around 30 USD for the cheapest, but they can go all the way up to 480 for the Liberator of Rayclast, with the upper tier supporter packs holding extra early access codes that you can give to your other friends. Alternatively, if you already spent over 480 USD on the same account in the first PoE game, you can also get one free early access code for PoE 2. That, or you can take part in my giveaway. I'm giving away 2 early access keys for PoE 2, and all you have to do is to be a subscriber of the channel, leave a like on the video, and comment down below if you want to enter. We're going to do a lot more of these as weeks pass by. But in the meantime, good to note is that if you're planning to play couch co-op only with your friend, a single account will suffice. So that is going to be a single key. That's all you're going to need. With that out of the way though, let's also go over what you have access to in the early access, because we're going to see about 80% of the game just here, including both early and end game. So we're going to get access to the first 3 chapters of the main campaign, which would bring us to around level 45. From that point on, we're gonna get the cruel difficulty in the early access, which is a repeat of chapter 1 to 3 with higher level enemies and a higher difficulty. So think of this as a form of a new game plus. But in the full game, the cruel difficulty will be gone, and instead we're just gonna get the remaining chapters from 4 to 6. Post level 65, on the other hand, we're gonna get all the end game all the way to level 100, and this already looks really big because we have Ascendencies, we have the Trials, we have the Atlas, which has several other end game activities baked right into it, pinnacle bosses, and to be honest, as a former Diablo 4 player, I'm shocked how much content there is, but again, reserving judgment for when it actually comes out. In total, we're gonna see about 50 bosses and over 400 enemy types just in the early access. So let's jump over some of this stuff that we get to play with, beginning with the classes and Ascendencies. Early access launches with 6 classes of the 12 announced, including Warrior, Ranger, Witch, Monk, Mercenary, and finally Sorceress. And each one of them will have access to 2 of their 3 Ascendencies, with the third ones coming out at a later date. But in the meantime, starting with the Sorceress, we have the Stormweaver, which focuses even more on elemental damage and calling elemental storms on critical hits and so on. Or you can go with the Chronomancer, which has the power of time manipulation, freezing time for a brief moment, even rewinding to restore HP, mana, or completely restoring your skills, which actually sounds quite powerful. Then we have the Mercenary, another one that I'm likely going to just jump into right away. This one has the Witch Hunter, which gets a big boost in damage on the first hit, has Explode on kill abilities, and even Sorcery Ward to absorb some of the incoming elemental damage. But there's also the Gemling Legionnaire, which kinda embeds gems directly into its body, so takes advantage of and even buffs skill gems to enhance its damage and elemental resistances, even the number of skill slots that it gets to apply, so that it has a bigger degree of skill customization. We've also seen the Warrior Ascendencies with the Warbringer, which combines melee combat but also with war cries, and basically also powers up the totem so that they also call on ancestral spirits when summoned. And totems also look really interesting. You can pretty much slot skills in the totem skills to make it cast slam attacks and other similar abilities. Plus the Titan, which is all about powerful attacks, aftershocks, and high chance of stunning, also very tanky, so the playstyle can feel more slow and methodical compared to others, but very satisfying to pull off. Then we saw the Ranger with the Deadeye. For those of you who are familiar with that, it pretty much provides huge bonuses to projectile-based builds, like extra arrows, extra damage, movement speed, and even incorporates lots of elemental-based damage. Looks really awesome. But then there's also the Pathfinder, which is quite distinct. So this one instead focuses a lot more on throwable flasks and poison damage, including boosting the max number of poison stacks that enemies can take, and gets many other buffs from consuming and throwing these flasks onto enemies. And then we saw the Witch. I really love this one, especially the Infernalist Ascendency. So this one transforms you into a literal cool looking demonic form, buffing your damage and mobility but at the cost of increasing the damage you take. But you also get access to an additional summon, which is the Hellhound, that's going to also absorb some of the damage that you take. Or you can go with the Blood Mage, which, just like what the name implies, uses the power of blood to augment its abilities and to stay alive for longer, even boost its own HP. Plus, it can consume its own HP besides just the mana to further cast abilities that are much stronger. So, looks really interesting for those who enjoy this playstyle. Now for Monk, there's the Invoker, which combines melee attacks with elemental abilities, including even providing you extra elemental energy waves on melee critical hits. You can also focus a lot more on cold or on lightning damage, and there's even ways to transform into an unbound avatar to gain even more damage as you apply more and more of those ailment stacks on targets. But there's also the Acolyte of Chayula. This is basically a very unique sort of embrace the darkness playstyle for the Monk, which offers ways to both protect your HP and convert that darkness into extra damage. Plus you get a lot of extra resistances, instant mana leech to sustain, energy shield, and there's other abilities in there that just makes the playstyle look very cool. But since we talked about them, how do you unlock Ascendencies in the first place? Well, you do so via special trials called the Trial of Secumus and the Trial of Chaos, available in the early access, but there's gonna be more in the full game or as we progress through the early access. These should unlock through the main campaign but are very challenging and you will need to be well prepared. Otherwise, you may fail them and will need to start them again. But the upside is that you can do whichever of them to unlock Ascendencies, or if you just want the extra rewards, as they are part of the endgame as well. So let's get started with the Trial of Secumus. This is going to be the first one you unlock by just following the main story around chapter 2, and it features a lot of roguelike mechanics. Namely, you choose to fight through a series of rooms which come with their own rewards, but will also feature a variety of detrimental effects. Important to note here is that your main resource here is going to be honor, not health. And when you get hit, you will lose honor, and unlike health, there's no flask to regen that. Instead, you have to play carefully, not get hit, or use a resource that drops from rooms called Sacred Water. So with that Sacred Water, you can spend it at a special NPC to recover at least a portion of your lost honor, but also gain extra buffs or even revive mechanics to increase your odds of survival. And once you finish a room, you can then claim its rewards and choose to progress towards the next part. So you will notice that a lot of these rooms provide rewards such as keys, which you can then use at the end of the full trial to open up more chests. The more keys that you get, the more of those chests you can open. This is going to happen once you have finished the entire floor and got to fight the floor boss. In this case, you can then defeat that boss, but after that you can then spend those keys. On top of that, you also gain access to the Altar of Ascendency. Once you've done that, you can pretty much go ahead, unlock whichever of them you want, even both of them if you want to complete this repeatedly. And on top of that, you're going to get some extra couple of points to invest in that tree. But this is also going to be part of the end game, like I said, with more special relics that you can find for even tougher trial runs, but with much bigger rewards. They even mention one in which you have to complete a whole run without getting hit once, but the rewards will be paying you handsomely. So this is probably going to be the most difficult of them all from the looks of it. The other one is going to be the Trial of Chaos. This comes in a bit later, around chapter 3 of the campaign. In this trial, you also have to progress through several rooms without dying, but there's a catch. At the start of each room, you get a reward, but also have to pick between 3 random debuff modifiers. So modifiers that may buff enemies, add environmental hazards, or curse you in one way or another. And the modifiers will persist through the whole run, including all the way to the boss fight that may spawn at the end. So as you progress from one room to the next, you can then choose between either claiming all the rewards that you got so far or go double or nothing. And that means all of those small debuffs that you collected in the rooms before eventually will pile up, which is going to exponentially increase the levels of difficulty. Just like before, these rooms may involve defeating enemies, escorting objectives, or surviving for a certain period of time. But once you're at the end, you get to fight a Chaos God boss, and on top of all the curses that you've got so far, it is going to be quite difficult on its own. But this is not the end of the end game. There's a lot more of it, because basically we also have the Atlas, which is kind of like an infinite number of randomized maps in all kinds of different biomes that we're gonna get to progress through by defeating the enemies inside. Among these areas, you'll encounter special maps marked as Breach, Delirium, Ritual, or Expeditions, and some of them are familiar from the previous PoE game, but basically these are going to give you special types of encounters with even better chances at battle load and sometimes secret and very difficult boss encounters for extra uniques. Each one of these activities have their own passive skill tree, so you can buff the difficulty of them, but also greatly increase the rewards that they give. So going over the next one, we have the Breach. In this one, you'll find mysterious hands, and if you interact with them, this will expand a circle revealing demons in the world. You'll have to defeat them as fast as possible to expand that timer and maximize your rewards. Now, some of the rewards here are very strong. This includes catalysts, which will let you improve the quality of the rings and the amulets that you have by improving specific mods. For example, you can get breach rings inside of these, which is another one of the rewards, and then you can improve them with catalysts even more, up to like 50% quality, making them some of the strongest rings in the game. Besides that, there's also a pinnacle boss encounter here, a breach boss, which you can obviously have access to by finding random breach splinters. You can then combine them into breach stone, which is what you use to summon that. But the boss has a chance to also drop specific uniques. Plus, the breach also has its own skill tree that you can further buff the difficulty on and also increase the rewards that you get. Then we have the ritual. In this, you have to interact with rituals and defeat all enemies inside to gain a resource called tribute. Each ritual that you complete will carry over its monsters to the next ritual on the map, so the more of these rituals you open, the more enemies from before it will spawn. But if you can survive the increased number of spawns, you get a bunch of rewards, including tributes, like I said, which you can then use to buy extra gear, and even omens at a special vendor. And omens are the most important here. These are very useful because they give special effects when you have them in your inventory. So for example, you can find omens that you can activate to make your next exalted orb to only add prefix modifiers to your gear or only remove suffixes and so on. The associated boss is going to be the King of Mists that you may have a chance to encounter during these rituals. Killing him also has a chance to drop uniques and unlocks more passive in the ritual section of the Atlas if you want to buff the difficulty but also increase the number of rewards. Another Atlas activity is going to be Delirium. Interacting with these mirrors will spawn a fog that reveals more dangerous enemies. So the deeper you travel in that fog, the more dangerous they become, but also more rewarding. Rewards here include Distilled Emotion. This is something you can combine 3 of, which is then going to let you instill your amulet with notable passives from your skill tree. This is going to be huge because it means not having to spend as many points to maybe reach a node that you really want and instead focusing on putting those into somewhere else. You also get a pinnacle encounter here via the simulacrum mechanic. So just like the breach, you also get special splinter items here that you can then combine into a simulacrum this time around to enter a special encounter. Except it's coming in the form of waves of enemies which become increasingly more difficult but also give better rewards. The higher the level of this, the higher the increase in number of waves and even spawned bosses, so eventually it will be worth it to check them out. And finally, there's the expeditions. You have all of these marked relics that you have to bring out with, explosives, which will reveal what's in their radius. So this can be treasures, but also monsters that you need to defeat, as well as remnants. And remnants are a big thing. If you blow these up, they don't just get to increase some of your subsequent rewards, but also to buff up the monsters in different ways. And you really have to be careful about this, because some of these remnants can provide some crazy buffs to the monsters, including even complete resistances to certain types of damage. So you don't want to go with more than you can handle. Just like in the case of many of the previous endgame activities, expeditions also have their own associated vendors with unique rewards, as well as special logbooks. Now these are maps that offer even more remnants and rewards, but also a chance at an extra unique boss. The difference is that the number of remnants over here is even greater, so you can go through a much longer chain of explosives. However, because of those modifiers, you have to be really careful at not buffing the enemies to more than you can handle. And this is just the beginning of it. There's obviously lots more systems in there awaiting you, so I think that this is going to be a lot of content for you to enjoy up until maybe next year or more. So let me know down below in the comments which one of the Ascendencies you're planning to go with, which one of the classes you're planning to play with. I of course also covered some of these in the previous video, so if you want a rough breakdown of how their playstyles go, definitely go ahead and check that one out as well, and maybe even take part in the giveaway. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.